On the 3rd of February, 1637 in Haarlem, a single tulip bulb carried the price of a canal house in Amsterdam, and nobody in that crowded room bought it. A bulb was not decoration, it was currency traded for oxen, wine, cheese beds, silver, and land, with notaries writing the whole absurd inventory down in careful ink. Over 3 winter months, prices climbed roughly 20-fold, then collapsed inside a single week, and almost everything you have heard about that week is wrong, starting with the flower itself. Tulips reached Europe from the Ottoman Empire late in the 1500s, and the botanist Carolus Clusius planted the first serious collection in the garden at Leiden. The Dutch Republic was then the richest place on earth. Ships came home from Asia stuffed with spice, and ordinary townspeople suddenly had money they did not need. But tulips are slow. From seed to flower takes 7 to 12 years, so every desirable bulb was scarce by biology long before anyone made it fashionable. The prized ones were never the clean, solid colors. They were the broken tulips streaked with flames of contrast, and nobody alive could predict which bulb would break. The king of the craze was Semper Augustus White, slashed with red. Barely a dozen bulbs existed anywhere, and their owner simply refused every offer he ever received. One viceroy bulb changed hands for 2 loads of wheat, 4 fat oxen, 8 pigs, barrels of wine, butter, cheese, a bed, a suit, and a silver drinking cup. A skilled craftsman in Amsterdam earned about 300 guilders a year, while the best bulbs sold near 5,000, which is 16 years of honest wages. The people trading were not peasants. They were merchants, apothecaries, physicians, and brewers, comfortable men who already understood risk and rather enjoyed the feeling of taking it. They dealt inside a tight circle, knew each other by name, and reputation mattered more than paperwork. So a bargain was sealed by honor rather than by any bank. The real market lived in taverns in groups they called colleges, where men drank bid and gambled, and the winner paid the commission in wine for the entire table. Prices were declared through a strange ritual of slates. Buyer and seller wrote figures, brokers reconciled them, and often nobody in the room had ever seen the actual bulb. Because in winter the bulb lies buried, they were not selling a flower, they were selling a promise. To dig it up in spring, the Dutch called it wind trade. These were futures contracts. 4 centuries before modern exchanges, a single paper could be resold 10 times over, while the real bulb slept quietly under frozen ground. Hardly any actual money moved in these deals. Payment was due at lifting time in spring. So enthusiasm ran far ahead of anybody's genuine ability to pay. Every new buyer believed one simple rule: somebody else will pay more tomorrow, and for one long, strange winter, that rule kept being spectacularly and profitably true. By early February, prices were doubling within days. Sellers held their stock back, and buyers borrowed heavily against profits they were absolutely certain would arrive in spring. Then, at an ordinary Haarlem auction, something unprecedented happened. The seller announced his price. The room stayed completely still, and not one single hand went up anywhere. He lowered it, and still nothing. Within hours, the news reached neighboring towns, and the rule about the next buyer stopped working everywhere at very nearly the same moment. The market did not deflate gradually, it simply vanished inside a week. A bulb worth a house on Monday had no price at all by the following weekend. Lawsuits followed. Courts refused to treat these contracts as real debts, and Haarlem proposed a compromise: settle the whole thing by paying 3.5%. Authorities were effectively declaring that this had been gambling rather than investment, and that the state had no intention of collecting anybody's losing bet for them. Now here is what breaks the familiar story. There was no mass ruin. Historians find a handful of bankruptcies and not one documented suicide caused by tulips. The picture of national madness was painted by satirical pamphlets printed in 1637 by moralists mocking greed. And those pamphlets are what everyone still repeats today. Perhaps a few thousand people in the whole country ever traded a bulb. The Dutch economy barely noticed the crash and carried on growing as if nothing happened. And the real twist sits inside the flower. Those famous flames everyone paid fortunes for were the symptom of a virus quietly destroying the bulb from within. The most expensive tulips were sick plants, blooming weaker and multiplying poorly, and the lovelier the pattern grew, the closer that variety came to vanishing. So what changed hands for a canal house was never a flower. It was a beautiful disease. And that is the only part of this story that is certainly true.